welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing another book review. This time I am going to be reviewing Angie Thomas's On the Come Up. So I love reading Angie Thomas. I read The Hate U Give. We've watched it in class after my students have read All American Boys. We'll then watch The Hate U Give as kind of the movie interpretation, even though I know they're not the same, but our school does not have a class set of The Hate U Give. So unfortunately, that is where we are at. This newest book is very, very, very exciting to me because I've been waiting for her to write more books. So without further ado, I want to jump into this book review. So there's gonna be an awkward pause in this video where it's like, I'm loading things. So I want to read you the synopsis because I read this book when I was on vacation and then I left it for my mom, and so I don't actually have it. So I'm going to have to read it off of my computer. So, On the Come Up. 16-year-old Bree wants to be one of the greatest rappers of all time, or at least make it out of her neighborhood one day. As the daughter of an underground rap legend who died before he hit big, Bree's got big shoes to fill. But now that her mom has unexpectedly lost her job, food banks and shut-off notices are as much a part of Bree's life as beats and rhymes. With bills piling up and homelessness staring her family down, Bree no longer just wants to make it, she has to make it. On the Come Up is Angie Thomas's homage to hip-hop, the art that sparked her passion for storytelling and continues to inspire her to this day. It is the story of fighting for your dreams even as the odds are stacked against you, of the struggle to become who you are and not who everyone expects you to be, and of the desperate realities of poor working-class Black families. Let's talk a little bit about this. So with the plot, there are certain things that the synopsis doesn't give us, right? So it's set in Garden Heights. If you've read The Hate U Give, you know that Garden Heights is where that story took place. From my understanding, from how she set up the world in this book, this takes place on the other side of Garden Heights. So Star's story in The Hate U Give is on one side, and then Bree's story is on the other side of Garden Heights. The perk of being set in the same area is that there isn't as much setup needed because, if you've read that first book, you already kind of understand what's going on. I would say that if you haven't read The Hate U Give, you might be a little bit more confused, but I don't think it takes much to understand what's going on at all. So there's that. So exposition-wise, story is strong, especially if you've read the first book. The build up to the climax is great. My only kind of negative takeaway, I guess, would be the falling action resolution portion of the story, right? So I felt like everything just suddenly ended. Like this big moment happens and then it's just like, done, end of book. And it left me wanting more. It left me being like, are you going to make a sequel? Are we going to get to know more about Bree? Or is this the end? Because I don't want to say it got tied up with a bow because it kind of didn't feel like it did, but it felt like it was trying to be tied up with a bow. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this book. I still think it's great, but I just really, really wish that, maybe there could have been more to it. It just is what it is. So, all in all, the plot was strong. She is an incredible writer, and so of course you expect nothing but the best. Her characters are always very round, so very full characters, very dynamic. You are never left wanting too much more with them, especially not with the main characters. So, for example, we get Bree's backstory, we learn about her trauma that she's kind of had to live through, but we also learn a lot about her mom's trauma. So things that her mom went through. It's not really clear that these problems existed before her dad's death, but it is very clear that her dad's death precipitated all the things that led to them being traumatic for Bree, and it created her mom's dependency on some of these issues that she built. And so that's why, she struggles to hold down a job, and She struggles to find trust in the community. And it was really interesting to get that kind of backstory from her mom, who is technically like a background character. So it was nice to see that growth from her. I also like that Angie Thomas built in a connection to her dad's side of the family. So with Bree not having her dad in her life, you know, sometimes it's easier to push that part of the family away. And instead, Bree lived with her grandma and grandpa for a little while. And she still interacts with her family all the time, especially in like going to church and seeing them at the church and family dinners and things like that. So I liked the way that they kept pulling in people who aren't necessarily from her past, but are important in our family. I did find myself kind of wanting like her two best friends. They started out as very dynamic characters and then they kind of faded to the background again. And then eventually they came back to the forefront. Same with her love interest. I wish there was more character building to them. I don't know if there was like a constraint on how long the book could be or what it was. I just like knowing characters. I like feeling connected to them. So that's just a me thing. So going from that, you know, kind of talk about plot, talk about character development. Can you tell my English teacher side is showing? Genre. So this book is definitely like a young adult realistic fiction novel. There's no question about it. It's centered on a high school student. It is set in a modern day world. It is a young adult realistic fiction story. I personally would give it 4 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there were some things like with character that I really wanted kind of more, and same with like the resolution at the end of the story. I felt like maybe there could have been a little bit more, but I'm picky sometimes when it comes to my reading. So I still, 4 out of 5 stars is awesome. I think this is the kind of book that everybody should read. And it's also the kind of book that I would love to take into my classroom. So in reading this book and in sitting down to kind of think about what I would do with this book, I kind of came up with like an idea of my classroom application. So first and foremost, I would love to read this either in a small group or as a whole class. Either way, I think it would be very powerful. I personally would send home a permission slip because I teach 8th grade, and while nothing in here happens that I've ever had any issues with parents, they don't normally seem to have an issue with the cussing. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't send home the permission slip. I would still want to make sure that, hey, like, this is the thing, this is what's kind of in the book, especially because it's got some gang violence and things like that. I would definitely say this is a late middle school, maybe 7th grade, 7th, 8th grade. I feel like 7th is pushing it a little bit, but maybe that's just because I don't teach 7th grade. 8th grade for sure, and high school. I think what would be really fun to do with this book is I personally would love to have lots of conversations about it. So this book opens the door to have many, many conversations about a variety of concepts, right? So one thing that she brings up in the book, which is brought up in The Hate U Give as well, is the idea of code switching, which is when around certain people you behave one way, but then around other people you behave another way. Bree goes to this kind of prep-ish school where, similar to Star, it's not the school that she goes to that's within her area. She goes outside of her area to go to school. She gets bused. So a bus comes specifically to pick her up, and she and her brother get bused to school, which is cool. I like the diversity. I think the fact that now it's 2 books where the kids have been taken out of the area schools kind of just shows that that conversation is not being had about how to make sure schools are actually equal. And so that's an interesting concept to bring up with kids, along with the code switching, like how she acts at school versus how she acts at home versus even how she acts with her grandparents. It's all very different. And how she acts with her aunt. I forgot about her aunt. How she acts with her Aunt Pooh. It's all very different. So it's kind of interesting to see the different sides of Bree as the story is going on. Especially when you start to realize that, like, how she wants to act in certain settings isn't how she really can act, and so then she has to like kind of grapple with that, like with the rap battles. She has to act a certain way in order to come off the right way, even though she shouldn't have to act at all. But she's also so in the habit of doing this that she doesn't know any other way to do it, which is kind of interesting to me. Maybe that's just a me thing. I also think it's important whenever you're reading books like these, it's important to have the conversation about race. It's important to have the conversation about how things can happen in certain areas. I work with a predominantly Hispanic population, but it has never stopped them from connecting with these texts. Not that they've read this one, but like with All American Boys, they still connect just as much, and we always have such powerful conversations. And same when we watched The Hate U Give, the conversations, the reactions, a lot of what they were talking about made it sound like it was things that they had witnessed, or they know people who have had to deal with similar aspects. So having these conversations with them gives them a safe place to be able to be like, hey, it's okay, you can talk about this with me. I'm not gonna freak out, I'm not gonna run away. This is a safe environment. So that's definitely something that I build in my class, and so they feel safe talking, but it would need to be built before you could maybe dig into a book like this. Also, I think it'd be really fun to talk to them, and maybe this is the nerdy side, but like to talk to them about how poetry and rap are so similar. I always love, whenever we do our poetry unit, we always bring out songs. And we're like, this is a poem. And they're like, but it's a song. And we're like, yeah, but it's a poem. Like, they had to write it first. They had to think it up. They had to create the rhythm, and they had to create the beats. This is a poem. And so it's kind of cool to see them kind of get a better understanding of poetry that way. I think looking at how poetry and rap are similar, especially with this book being so focused on Bree and on her goal to be a rapper and on all of that, and seeing her go to the rap battles and seeing her, you know, try to get producing deals, and to see her even throughout all of it still fight to be her true authentic self, and how her songs, her poetry was so important to her. I think that's crucial to hit on, especially in like, if the book is already lending towards music that the kids listen to, then why not use it as a genre connection? So like, yeah, this is poetry. I think that would be really fun to do. This is my thought, is like, have them as their like novel project, right? I almost always do a choice sheet, but one of the options could be like, write a rap about the book. I think that'd be cool. Or about the theme, or whatever it may be. I think that would be really, really fun. I also think that this book could be utilized to discuss LGBTQ plus rights. There is an LGBTQ plus character. Actually, there's two. So that's always a great conversation, especially with the way it's handled in this book. It's not an issue to bring up that conversation because it is handled well. And I love finding books where it's handled well, because then I feel safe showing it to my kids and being like, hey, look, this is how this should be handled. It's okay. I also think it's cool to talk about independence, specifically independent women, because it is a female character focus, but independence as a whole, talking about how Bree holds on to that individuality and she doesn't let it go, and I think that's important. And I think it's something that maybe the guys wouldn't maybe connect with as much, but I think a lot of girls would, because I feel like too much of the time women are trying to be something else, and Bree just refuses to be something else. She refuses to be anything what she wants, even when she may be getting told like, well, this isn't really your world, there's not that many female rappers. She doesn't care. And I think seeing that kind of like thought process and mentality and like strength is a really good thing. And kind of the last thing I would probably talk about with my kids would be the concept of growing up too fast. I feel like a lot of my kids personally have grown up really fast. They've had to, not necessarily by choice, which is, it's sad. But I also think providing them with an avenue in which we can kind of discuss how growing up too fast can happen, and what it can look like, and what those duties can be, and how even if you've had to grow up too fast, you're allowed to still be a kid. I can't imagine what it must be like to be, you know, a caregiver for a young child at 14. And these are mostly siblings, like younger siblings that my kids are dealing with, but they do it, and they don't complain. And so just having that conversation of, what does it mean to grow up too fast? What does it mean to have to deal with things that maybe you shouldn't have to deal with, and how can we handle that? So those are just kind of some of the ideas that I have about bringing it into my classroom. Of course, there's a lot of factors that would have to happen before that could ever happen, but it's a thought process, and it's there, and it's there. So yeah, that is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. 4 out of 5 stars. Super good book. Please go check it out. If you have any books that are similar, or books that you would like to see me review, please drop them in the comments, because that's the only way I'm ever going to know. And yeah, I'm hoping to get another book review out soon. I kind of read a lot for a while, and then they all piled up on me. So I'm working on that. I've slowed down my reading a little bit to help myself get caught up, but I'm hoping I'll be back soon. So I'll see you guys next time on Away We Go. Bye guys!